I identify as, well, besides being a blind person, I also identify as panromantic asexual and as a pagan Jedi. So just to kind of introduce some of what that means, basically it means that I'm a member of the LGBT plus community, and I don't have a gender preference for relationships, but don't have uh, the same kind of physical attractions that other people would have. Um, not not abnormal, just different. And basically, as far as things like discrimination are concerned, I think a lot of us know what that's like being blind. But growing up, I never really understood who I was, because who I was wasn't an option in my family. I was raised in a very strict household, and I would be asked things like, you know, I would be told things like, well, you know, you should be with a white Christian man. And that's the kind of things that I was told, by my family growing up. And so falling in love with a woman as I wasn't a thing until I was an adult. And I kind of learned that when I went to college and kind of found different relationships and different things that I understood, different people I was attracted to, it meant my whole life, my whole worldview shifted. And to kind of give an idea, I only came out to my family last year. And before that, I was in a relationship with a man and basically passing as straight, even though I'm not. And I think part of the thing that really took a long time for me to realize was that, well, that people that I know are more accepting than I think, but also that even, even in many different groups, like I find that things like choir or the LGBT division in the NFB, or the group, I should say, are that it's a good thing to have like a safe place, a place that I can talk about things like this, be myself, be open with people. And it's just sort of one of those things that I really appreciate. And I am fortunate that I live in a place where it is not legal to fire people because of being in the LGBT community, but I've seen it happen a lot. I've seen a lot of friends panic about these things or know that they didn't get hired because of that reason, blind or sighted. And so I think that the intersectionality, the cross identities, and is important. And for me, it's been a crucial thing, and actually one of the things that has gotten me to be more active in the Federation. So I'm sure we'll have time for questions at the end, but I appreciate being asked to speak today.
I can jump in next. Thank you, Lena, for kicking us off. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Amy and Shara, and to the convention in general, to allowing us a space to speak about our diversity. My name is Syed Grizzly. I'm originally from Massachusetts, out in the Springfield area, Longmeadow. I left the state for training in Louisiana, and then I went to my undergrad in Austin, Texas. Back in Massachusetts. I'm going to be starting law school in Cambridge, Mass this upcoming fall. So I'm really happy to be back in the state. And for me, I am not only blind, but I'm also a brown Pakistani Muslim. So that has really made my life interesting. And I'm actually really grateful to have all these different traits. I know some people can view, being blind or any other thing that isn't, mainstream as a burden, but I think it really prevents your life from being vanilla, and it really makes your life very interesting and makes your life, very, very colorful. So the challenges that I have faced is that within the Pakistani and Muslim community, there's a lot of disability phobic sentiment. A lot of it stems from ignorance. A lot of it stems from cultural taboos. And I wouldn't identify it as necessarily a religious thing. I think all the world's religions preach a message of love and compassion, but it's certain cultures that are more open than others. And then on the other side, in the disability community, generally it tends to be a monolith. It tends to be Christian, white, straight people, cisgender, etc. So I always used to refer to my life as the two Bs, in that I kind of lived in two completely different worlds. There was the brown world, and then there was the blind world. And the brown world wasn't accepting of my blindness, and the blind world wasn't necessarily very understanding or inclusive of my brownness. And there's a difference between diversity and there's a difference between inclusion. Diversity means that there's somebody, in the room who looks like me, but inclusion is that next step where that person's sitting at the table and really is able to create specific programming that includes, people that look like them and people who share traits with them. But thankfully, just due to cultural shifts that have gone on within our country and around the world over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to bring these two identities together, both in the blindness community and within like the Pakistani and Muslim community. So for the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to go to mosques and Muslim student associations on campuses and other Muslim forums and be able to talk about disability and how we can kind of break down some of those taboos and phobias that exist. And then I've had the opportunity then to come within the blind community and perform Arabic and Muslim invocations from like the Mass State Convention to National Convention to Texas State Convention all around the country. So that's just been a really beautiful and transformative experience, being able to bring these two very dear parts of my identity together and not having to separate them anymore. So a few years ago, with the National Association of Blind Students, we were able to co-find the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, specifically tailored to students. So then through that, we were able to share about different students' experiences, whether it had to do with sexual orientation or gender identity, race, ethnicity, religion, etc. And then on the national level, I've had the extreme pleasure of working with Sean Calloway, a person who I can't say enough great things about, and been able to really push the needle forward on making our organization, not only on an affiliate level, but on a national level, more representative of the blind people of America, and really appreciating and celebrating how within our blindness, we also have so many different identities to offer and to share with one another. And it's through these differences that we're stronger, and we're able to approach different problems that we have in a more creative manner, and really bring our movement to the 21st century.
Okay, I can go next. Hi, my name is Barbara Lomax, and I'm an African-American female. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, the inner cities of Boston, a divorced woman with 2 adult children. And what I want to talk about is family and conditionings. Growing up, I can recall having conversations with my parents in terms of, things I should do and what I should expect as an African American. There was always conversations about, people are going to look at you differently. You are always going to be expected to do a little bit more than other people, just so that they'll show you and accept you as a Black person. And I felt myself doing the same thing to my children, saying the same thing to and particularly my son, having to train him on, what he should and should not do as an African-American male. And what I noticed from all of this sort of conditioning is that that I accepted certain behaviors from people. I can recall going into the store, having a sweatshirt on and sneakers, and people following me around and asking me questions like, "Do you need help?" I can recall my son being called, a light-skinned N-word. And these are things that, we had conversations about, but we didn't really do anything about. We just sort of like, okay, this is what happens when you are, a Black person. And so when the Black Lives Matter kind of really, last year, and it really brought a lot of things forward in terms of what was still happening in the United States, I started thinking about, no, next time I'm in a store and someone is walking behind me to see if I'm going to steal or not, I'm not only am I going to just look at them, I'm going to say, stop. So, I say that it is really, really good to confront discrimination, to look at it full force and say, no, we're not going to accept it. It's not acceptable because we are all Americans and we are all a part of this world. And that also goes as a blind person to, it's the same thing. We are all a part of this world in the United States, and we all need to be treated the same. So.
Thank you, Barbara. So I'm Earl Williams, and for me, when it comes to discrimination, I went to the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind in St. Augustine, Florida, so since I was in the 4th grade. So we never talked about race. They always told us that the only thing I would have to worry about when it came to discrimination would be my disability. So I was born in South Carolina, and my mom moved to Florida when I was 1. She rarely talked to us really about race. And then because I went to the school I went to, I was in 2 worlds. So I'd come home to the projects and eat our food and stuff like that, and try to set the table. My mom would say, "That's too white," because I'm setting the table. Then I would go back to the school I was at, and I'm introduced to like rock music and different types of music and people and stuff. So it was hard. So I never knew anything. But when I went to UMass Boston, I'm 48 now. But when I was 46, I took this class about race and oppression. So I didn't know, I learned more now than I ever knew growing up in Florida, that, how if someone tells me, well, Earl, you're articulate, that I always took that as a compliment. But it actually turns out that that's a microaggression, because generally other people don't say to other people, oh, well, you're articulate. So that's what I learned. But I'm constantly learning things. I have two sons. My biological son is mixed race, so he's Black and Puerto Rican, but he can pass for white. My adopted son is Puerto Rican. So the conversations that I've had with them was that they had to be careful about, I generally tell them how they dress as how someone looks at them. So if you walk around with your pants hanging low, people are going to think a certain way about you. I said, I don't want you to be a statistic. I want you to be above that. So I'm constantly having conversations with them, and then how I speak to people and how I take in information. Discrimination, for me, if I'm walking in a store and someone, I never notice that if it's someone's following me. And I've always said to that was that I can't see them if they're clutching their purse. So it never really mattered to me until I started taking these kind of classes. So I think the more that we all educate ourselves on race, because race is a social construct, that the better we'll be able to understand each other. And that being blind, that's being Black and blind to me are one thing. I can't separate them, because someone's going to see my skin color first, and then they're going to talk about my disability, because they will be able to see that I have one. So it just kind of, learning about privilege and everything. So that's where I'm at on this.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I very much appreciate you all sharing such personal stories. One of the things that, and last year we're fortunate in Massachusetts. We're fortunate because we do have a diverse population, and we have a lot of diversity in our NFB affiliate. And that's a good thing. But I think one of the things that your voices and your stories give us the opportunity to learn about and underscores the importance of listening. This morning's panel, the only person, when I asked about advocacy, who said that you need to listen to people was my boss, Sassy Outwater Wright. Everybody else talked about how they put their names on all of these bills and they were always at the forefront and thinking about people. Well, I think what we need to do and make sure that we do is to listen to what you have to say, is to make sure that if you have something to say, that we take that into consideration. So I invite you and strongly encourage you, if you see anything that we are doing that isn't okay, that isn't acceptable, that you find challenging or offensive or anything, I would like you to speak up and teach us. We all need to teach one another. So thank you for your openness and your candor. Do we have questions?
If you dial in, it's *9 to raise your hand or *6 to unmute, or you can hit Alt-Y on a Windows machine.
Hi, it's Jen. Jen Bowes. I have a quick question for the panel, for anybody who wants to answer it. First of all, thanks for this important panel. I wondered if you had any advice on educating other community groups or schools. I had the opportunity to speak a couple of years ago at my daughter's 4th grade class. I wasn't their main speaker, but I did facilitate a couple of workshops about understanding disability in 4th grade. but I did make the point of saying, look, my experience is just my experience, and there's so many different ones based on all kinds of other demographics and life experiences. And I tried to say it in a way they would understand and that the teachers would understand. And, because it's not just that educating somebody about a disability, it's many other things. And I wondered how you kind of approach talking to people, maybe not even in a group setting, but just individuals, and sort of making sure they understand what you're telling them in terms of your overall experience and all the intersection between different characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, sharing your own experiences and then sharing the experiences of our members too, talking about like how diverse our membership is. We have some phenomenal people within our membership that have a lot of material that is available as well about their life experiences. I recently read the autobiography of Everly Hairston, and it was life-changing. And it was about her experience not only as a blind woman, but also a Black woman, and a Black woman who marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and went to jail with MLK Jr. So, being able to share materials like that with the broader community, I think really speaks to how diverse our community is and how intersectional the blind community is. One thing I always like to say is that Alabama was not only the last state to lynch a Black man, Alabama was also the last state to sterilize blind people in order to receive VR. So race and disability are so tightly intertwined and cannot be separated. And I know even within the blindness community, up until a few years ago, there was a push to say that we are a disability-focused organization. We're not a race-focused organization. Well, we work on socioeconomic issues. We work on education issues. We're not necessarily a socioeconomic organization. We're not necessarily an education issue. The reason why we work on those particular issues is because those are things that affect us as a blind community. So if racial discrimination is something that deeply affects blind people who belong to marginalized racial groups, then it's something that we as an organization need to focus our efforts on.
And I think for me, I live next to a police officer who's white, and we've had he's actually came to me because we're pretty good with each other, and I'm the only Black person in my neighborhood. So he came and he asked me like, well, Earl, how do you handle if someone is like saying a derogative term to me? And I said, well, honestly, I've never had anything happen to me. I said, if anything, I'm more worried about like when it comes to my vision. I've never had an issue with someone about my race, but that the fact that he wanted to know like how I would handle something, or how if he said something to me that ever was offensive, like we've never had an issue. And I said, well, Tom, I will tell you. But then I also said, in order for race relations to get better with people, I think you have to have conversations. And the only way you're going to have those conversations, like for instance, I invited him to my house for dinner. He's never been here. I've been in this house since 2009. And so last year when he came, we had a good conversation. We hung out and everything, and it was nice, and it made our relationship better. But I told him how I grew up, and then he told me how he grew up growing in a predominantly white neighborhood, that he never really thought that I would have issues to education or anything like that, because his kids didn't have any issues. He didn't even know, like when it came to, when you say white privilege, he said that he thought that was more about the things he had. And I said, that's not what that means. That means that you're a white man, and that's what gives you privilege. You just the fact that you're a white man. So you'll get things quicker than I would get things. because my intersections are, I'm a Black man with a disability. So then they wash out each other. So I have no real privilege. So I have to work harder to get the things that you don't have to do. Just because you walk out your door, you automatically are going to get them. So just being able to have these kind of conversations with people, no matter how difficult they are. I also suggested to him that he looks up, her name is Dr. Robin DiAngelo, and she talks about how the hardest thing, she said, for a white person to admit is that there is privilege. Once you get them to say that there is privilege, that's a big step. And then you can work on everything else, and then we all will eventually come together. So I'm hopeful for that. And I hope in our community, because there are biases in our own blindness communities based on how we were raised and everything like that, that we come and we share more things to make our organization better and where people feel more included.
So for me, since mine, I mean, I didn't mention race, but I'm white. So for me, it's a little different. But as far as the LGBT community goes, I haven't necessarily done a whole lot of educating. The educating I usually do relates to what the heck do those labels mean? Is why I started out with kind of a mini explanation of what those labels mean, because there are a lot of misconceptions about what a lot of labels within, or identities within the LGBT community mean. And the first people I had to start educating were my family, really. And like now, it's funny because now I am happily married as of a week ago, to a wonderful woman, and things have definitely been interesting as far as talking to friends, telling, some of the other big things are like a lot of things, it's not a choice. One doesn't choose to be straight. One doesn't choose to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, any of that either. And that is a huge sticking point for some people. And just, while it doesn't affect me, I try to educate people on gender pronouns, because there are a lot of people that does affect. And I guess I had to be educated on some of these things because I didn't know, and someone took the time to say, Lena, this is why this is important. And so for me, I feel like it's kind of a way of giving back, of supporting people, of, whatever I need to do to kind of be a community member, but also be an ally to other people that have other identities. And so I feel the importance of, I think one of the, like what Amy said, actually, one of the best ways for people to be educated is to just listen, to just hear what people are saying. If someone says, I identify as male, or I consider, I'm a man, fine. No matter what their voice sounds like, that's who they are. And I think those are the kinds of things that are important to really grasp a hold of when working with people, when talking to anybody. Even me, like, Lena is a name that I have been called and continue to go by since 2005. So, if I say I'm Lena, but somebody knows my legal name that I really don't use, then that's how I should be called. I think a lot of the things with education is getting people to see that it's not a matter of political correctness, but a matter of respect for people. I think that's one of the most important things about this.
We have Lorna.
Yes, hi, thank you. I want to say this. I don't have a question per se, but first of all, I'm so happy that this panel was put together and we had these three wonderful folks who are here to share their experiences with us. I think that makes a huge difference. And I would hope that these kinds of panels and presentations and workshops would continue, because I think as a blindness organization living in a diverse world where we're not just blind, but we may be Black and blind, we may be brown and blind, and, you know, LGBTQI, these things are essential parts of our identities. And I think that it's important for us, as we say that we are advocating for equality, that we learn more about one another. Several of you have said that it's important to learn to listen. But I also think it's also important for us to be a bit introspective about ourselves and the ideas that we hold, and to sort out what those ideas mean to us and how we view others as well. You know, within our families, within friends, as well as within the organization. Thank you.
Hello, this is Tom speaking. I love what you guys were saying about disability and the other marginal minorities being identities. But I'm wondering, what do you guys think of identity first language when talking about disabled people? Kind of going off of that.
I can start that. I use it pretty regularly. I mean, when I introduced myself, I said I'm a blind, pansexual or panromantic asexual pagan Jedi. And I feel that none of that takes away from me being a person, because it's all part of who I am. So I find that it's okay to use identity first language, and I actually find it preferable, not because I don't believe these things necessarily define me. Like, I know that's the main argument, or one of the big arguments for people, that identity first language makes it so that the identities define you, and that's why you use person first language, because they don't. But I also kind of, to me, this is, my personal belief, I don't feel the need to tell people I'm a person, because if they can't figure that out, then there's a different problem in the making. And whether my identities come before my being a person or not isn't going to change what's going on. So, and I think another part of that for me is having to hide part of who I was or who I am. Having to not say I am a member of the LGBT community and I'm proud of it. Not being able to say that for a long time makes me want to say that as a top thing, not as a defining characteristic, but as part of, I am Lena Bandy, now Lena Salusar, and I am proud of being all of these things. I am blind, queer, I am, a Jedi. I am all of these things, and I'm proud of that. So for me, identity first language is something that I use pretty regularly.
Hi, this is Barbara. I do use identity in terms of using pronouns, saying she, how I identify, but I haven't, I don't generally say I'm African American female or any of that. Usually, and oddly enough, just recently I had people not knowing, and I'm laughing because I had just had this conversation with Lena earlier, because sometimes people don't know, that what your race is. So, but I generally don't really mention it, at all.
And for me, I don't really. I just say I don't really. I mean, I will say he, he, him, for pronouns, but I don't really identify myself other than Earl, until someone asks me questions, and that depends on how I feel about that person. If, I don't generally share all of my stuff with people unless I trust them. So.
I need to clarify if I can. I don't necessarily introduce myself in that go, oh yeah, so I'm Lena, I'm this. But when I talk about things like this, in this type of situation or in a situation where, I'm giving an introduction, a lot of times I will if it's relevant to the conversation, then I won't say I'm a person who is blind.
That's what I like referring to as well.
Right.
Talking about the blind community collectively, you say blind people or blind and vision impaired people or just the blind or the vision impaired.
I usually do say blind people. I don't go with the people who are blind because for like I said, if I need to remind someone that I'm a person, there's a whole different issue involved.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
This is Rashad. The only time I experienced some kind of discrimination, I'm professional. I work with all kind of people, Black, gays, lesbian, whatever. I've never felt there's a discrimination between people. As a professional, I did not experience that. And the only time I start experiencing the discrimination is when I become a blind. I just, especially applying for a job. It's. I know you guys talking about race discrimination, gender discrimination, but I feel there's a huge discrimination for a blind person or disabled person. I don't know if you guys experiencing that or not.
Absolutely.
I think most of us have. And
Absolutely.
Which is why
Absolutely.
I didn't mention anything about it, because honestly, I figured most of us knew what that was.
Do we have one more question before we move on?
We had Carrie with her hand raised.
Okay, Carrie, go ahead.
Hi, so my question to you guys is now that we're aware of these various issues, what do you believe is the next step as an affiliate we can take to address, the biases and the problems that we see within our own community just here in Massachusetts?
So Catherine mentioned how the task force is going to be coming out with trainings in regards to sexual assault. So obviously that's a big part of diversity and inclusion, as well as creating a safe space. So, it's for our members to participate in these trainings, especially Carrie, people like you participating in trainings like that. I know that National is planning on coming out with trainings focused on more broad D&I matters as well. So I think that's the best thing to do, just because, you know, Earl, Lena, Barbara, and I, if they don't mind me speaking for all of us, but I think we're coming at this from more of a perspective in that we are intersectional blind people, but we are not necessarily like the trained professionals who have done a bunch of research and have like degrees in diversity and inclusion and all this kind of stuff. So the great thing is that there are organizations and consulting companies that work specifically on that and have developed trainings to help with change management, which is a field of study on its own, and guide and help institutions and organizations really make sure that they're not only diverse, but also inclusive.
I totally agree with that. But having said that, I mean, I think trainings are great and they're very important, and we'll certainly try to do that. But I think each of you coming forward and bringing your own perspective is also equally, and if not more valuable. So thank you to the panel. Let's have a door prize. I don't think we heard from the winner, the people whose names were called earlier. So do we have a door prize?
Do we have a Lorna?
Yep, we do have a door prize. It is another $25 Visa gift card. And our next winner is Basil Maurice.
Oh, Basil. Basil's here.
I hope you're here.
His name's in the list.
He's here.
I'm here.
Wonderful. It's nice to have a winner who's actually here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Can we do one more then, Amy?
Yes, do one more. And when you're done, if you could text or call my number and let me know how many more you have, just so I can get a sense.
Yes, will do. The next one is a $20 cash prize. And our next winner is Gloria Nathan.
Gloria here. Put Gloria in the list, but we'll give her a few minutes.
Okay. All right. That's all for now. Thank you.
Before we go on to our last important panel, I want to let you know that there was an error. I was going by an old document, and the third person who's up for board appointment election this tomorrow is not Precious Perez, it's David Tiki. So if the nominating committee needs any help from me around this, please feel free to contact me. If you need to reconvene, you need a room or something, let me know. But again, the third person who is up for nomination and whose nomination he will be voted on tomorrow, if he's recommended or if he's nominated from the floor, is David Tiki. Now, I want to go to our last panel. I want to welcome Al Elia, who used to be from Massachusetts. I keep hearing that he may come back, but I haven't seen him yet living back here. But he is representing Tree Legal, who helps us out with a lot of our NFB initiatives. So Al, I want to welcome you to our 2021 convention.
I sent you a request to unmute, Al.
Okay, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. And I was, saying when you introduced me, there's been a plague going on. I would love to come back to Boston, but it didn't seem prudent at the time. But thank you for that introduction, and I miss y'all in Massachusetts. I'm on the other side of the country now in Seattle, and we'll be here for at least for another couple of years. We'll see how long that goes. But in the meantime, just give me a second. I want to pull up my notes. There we go. I wanted to talk to you about some of the stuff that the NFB and also our firm, sort of with the blessing of NFB, has been working on in the legal arena. First of all, I want to shout out to Sean Calloway for his mentioning of the various surveys that Valerie Yingling and the NFB are doing, or I should say that the NFB is doing through Valerie Yingling. And please do reach out to her if you've encountered some of these issues. Particularly, we've been hearing a lot of complaints recently about COVID websites, whether they are the websites that tell you whether you qualify for a vaccine, or if you do qualify, allow you to schedule yourself for a vaccine or schedule yourself to get tested, or basically anything to do with COVID and sort of, public services. It's been really a disaster in a bunch of locations where, these websites that you go onto are not accessible. And frequently, by the time you realize it's not accessible, all of the, reservation slots are filled up. So it's not like you can make a phone call and get yourself scheduled. If you also are encountering those problems, please let us know. We want to make sure that we're addressing them, as I think it's fair to say that's probably the most urgent thing health-wise that we and everyone else is dealing with. In addition, we've been hearing some complaints about unemployment websites, public entities, unemployment websites not being accessible. Obviously, that's also a huge problem because, for those of us who may have lost our jobs due to COVID and need to be able to file for unemployment, not being able to do that is obviously a huge financial hit. So if you're encountering those sorts of problems, again, please do contact either Valerie Yingling or you can contact our office, which is 415-873-9199. Or you can contact me, Elia at trelegal.com. Obviously, the voting problems with the absentee voting and voting generally, continue. But we're hoping that we can get some of those issues resolved prior to the next election this year and in future years. So again, if you encounter problems with those, let us all know. All being us, TRE Legal, and or Valerie Yingling at the NFB. We've also been encountering problems with people not having access to public services in person. This is kind of shocking to me, but you would think that if a blind person walks into a county clerk's office and needs to fill out a form, that they could get assistance from somebody there to fill out those forms. But apparently, at least in some places, we would be mistaken. We've had situations where a person went in to, sort of transact business in her local county clerk's office, and she needed to fill out a form, and they told her that she needed to either bring somebody with her or go home and fill it out, somewhere else, because they absolutely positively were not going to help her to fill out the form because they didn't do that for anyone who wasn't blind. So they certainly didn't have to do it for a blind person. We're addressing that, and we're hopeful that it will either resolve, or if not, if it doesn't resolve one way, it'll resolve the other. Either by settlement or by court action, but we filed a federal action about that, and that is progressing. We've also got situations where people in their employment are not able to access systems that are being used that they're required to use to do their jobs. In some of those cases, they're federal cases involving Section 508. So it's not even an accommodation question. It's that the software has to be accessible or the systems have to be accessible, and they are not. And we have a case that's been going on now for 6 years because the federal government apparently can't be bothered, which, needless to say, can be a little frustrating for all of us. In other sort of employment, in sort of private employment, we are currently working with a major employer, and we're hoping that we may be able to, and by we I mean the NFB, announce a outreach and accommodations that are going into place in a major nationwide employer that will enable blind people to have access to a lot of well-paying jobs that they previously didn't have access to because of inaccessible technology. So so that's exciting and good, and that will be through settlement that, as I say, we're hoping to be able to announce soon. Similarly, I know I've talked to you guys about kiosks in the past. We are currently working on closing a settlement with a major restaurant chain regarding the kiosks that it uses in its stores that will allow blind people to independently operate those kiosks to order meals and perform all the tasks that non-blind people can perform. I'll do another positive one before I, go back into the doldrums here. We had a settlement. We reached a settlement with a major public transportation entity. That entity was basically operating its disabled access pass system in a manner that was discriminatory for people with disabilities. Basically, as a blind person, when you got your access card and you had no way of knowing how to operate it because all the material that would show up would be in print. You had one day your card would simply stop working. You'd receive a notice in the mail, but the notice in the mail ahead of time that your card was going to be expiring soon was also in print. And then when you went to transfer to get a new card, you were told that you couldn't get any of the funds off of the old card and you just had to forfeit them. Meanwhile, there was an identical program for seniors that didn't require you to ever renew. Even if you had a permanent disability, you still had to renew, whereas seniors and other people didn't have to renew. So we came into a settlement with that entity to make sure that people with permanent disabilities like blindness would be able to have a card that did not expire, so that this issue with transfer of funds was not an issue. In addition, the website that you loaded funds onto the card to pay for transit was not accessible, and so part of the settlement was that they're going to make that system accessible by mid-year. And then, I will end on one that I really couldn't believe in this day and age. But in late 2020, a person went to a grocery store with her parents and her boyfriend. She and her boyfriend are both blind. They both use service animals, and they were told that they could not bring their service animals into the grocery store with them. This required them to call the police. And even when the police arrived, the store manager, this wasn't even just like like rando employee. This was like the store manager outside telling them they couldn't come in. And the store manager actually argued with the police officer who showed up at the store to tell him that he had to let these people in with their service animals, and argued with the police officer, telling the police officer that no, it couldn't possibly be that we have to let dogs in, because dogs are dirty and we can't possibly have them in the store. That happily just resolved. And that store chain has educated all of its employees, not just in English, but in whatever their native languages are, to ensure that that sort of thing doesn't happen. So I suppose there is a, happy outcome, even though the fact that it happened at all is really distressing. That's sort of a snapshot of the sorts of things that we've been working on and are working on. The sorts of things that if you're facing, or encountering, please let us know. I mean, obviously, we're still also doing website NAP cases. It's certainly our hope that the NFB's efforts in the legislative arena with the Web and Mobile App Technology Access Act will help to put a stop to our need to do those cases. But, if you do encounter them, please let us know. And any of the other issues you guys are facing as a result of, whether it's employment technology, refusal of access, etc., let us know or contact Valerie. Either one of us will be able to put you in touch with the people you need to speak to. And with that, I will take any questions that Amy gives me time to take.
Absolutely. Do we have questions? Thanks, Val.
Carrie?
Hi, so my question is, if someone is working with another agency on an issue that's similar to one that you've mentioned, do you guys want to know that just for tracking purposes as well?
I would say yes, because it is always helpful for us to know when something is being addressed. That way, if someone else comes to us and says, hey, I'm facing this problem, then, we can direct them to whoever it is that's already handling the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And is it best to just contact Valerie with that, or does it matter?
So, our firm is very closely intertwined with the NFB. Tim Elder is the president of the California affiliate. I am a chapter vice president, and we are in touch with Valerie frequently. So if you contact us, we will let Valerie know, and if you contact Valerie, she will let us and the other attorneys that work with the NFB know.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. I think someone else had raised their hand, but then they put it down. I don't know if that means they didn't want to speak.
We got Marinella.
Audio now.
Hello.
Hello.
Long story short, last semester I was trying to do a test, and it was offered online proctoring. And when I had issues when it came to accommodations, I found out that it was not accessible with my screen reader software because I use JAWS. And I was wondering, who should I contact about getting that looked at? Because, sometimes testing is one of those big things, and they told me I had to go in person to a nearby testing center to get it done, but online proctoring was a big offer. And
thank you for mentioning that. I'm sorry you had to go through it, but that is another type of case we have been dealing with. That we were able to resolve that for some people who were taking the bar licensing exam to become attorneys. We are currently involved in working on a case for a person who's almost in exactly the same situation you're talking about, with an insurance licensing exam. And if you contact me, outside the convention, as I said, 415-873-9199 or aelia@trelegal.com. And Amy certainly has my contact info. She'll put you in touch with me. And this is the sort of thing that I think we could probably help you with. And certainly if we can't, we can connect you with the folks at the NFB if it's not something that we can take for some reason. But this is exactly the sort of, we are doing a case just like that. And you're right, it is a major problem because, there's no reason why you should put yourself at risk of COVID just because you're blind and they can't deal with their technology working in your house.
Yeah, I told them the same thing, and
yep.
And signing in was like no problem, but when they said, yeah, it's not accessible, I'm like, how could that be? So,
I'd love to help you. So, like I said, get in touch.
All right, will do.
Any other questions?
Hi, I think it's my turn. My name is Rashad. I ran into an issue a few years ago, taking the PE exam, professional engineering exam. They would not allow me to use anything besides my handheld magnifier, regular magnifier. I worked with the Mass Commission of the Blind for years, and I get nowhere. I didn't realize that you guys, I could have resolved it a long time ago if I get in touch with you. Is that something sounds like you work on?
It is. It's possibly the fact that it was 2 years ago may be a problem because it may be too late.
That was about 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be, that is not something we can help you with now unless you're planning to take the exam again.
Gotcha. Okay.
So 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years is definitely too far. 1 to 2 years.
Right. The question to you: does the Mass Commission of the Blind knows about your services?
I mean, the Mass Commission the Mass Commission, I don't think generally refers people to attorneys. That would be like the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. But it's not that we're a service, right? I mean, we're a law firm. And I don't think the Mass Commission generally refers people to lawyers. I've certainly never gotten a call from the commission. But as I'm not a commission employee, I've never asked. But I don't think that that's the sort of thing the commission does.
No, they don't. This is Amy. I can tell you they don't.
There you go.
Well, I was just looking for resolution, and I wish they told me there's a way to do it by talking to these lawyers that deal with cases like this. After struggling with them for almost 5 years, and I got nowhere.
Well, this is why Amy's there for you. You talk to Amy and say, Amy, I'm having this problem, and if Amy can refer you to me or to Valerie to refer me to me, her who can then refer you to me or what have you.
Gotcha.
But that's why one of the reasons why the NFB exists is because the commissions for the blind don't handle all the problems that blind people have.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Amy, I hope that's okay, me telling people to talk to you.
That's fine. Absolutely. That's what I'm here for.
I don't see
She's
any more
wonderful.
hands.
That's what I'm here for.
Well, and if there's no other questions, then again, I miss you guys. I miss being there at the Embassy Suites in my old stomping grounds. And I do hope to get back there someday. But being married to a doctor in training is a long haul. So we'll see what happens. And even if I don't move back there permanently, I'm a Boston resident in my heart, and I will certainly be happy to, participate either remotely or in person as I am able going forward in Massachusetts stuff.
Thank you so much. Appreciate having you. Nice to hear your voice.
You too.
Okay, let's wrap it up with a couple of door prizes, please.
Okay, so we have another door prize, which is $20 cash prize, and that person is Mika Paikala.
Mika Paikala.
I'm sure that guy's not here.
That guy may not be here. Are you there, Mika?
He's on the list there.
He's on the list.
Yeah, but
Yeah, he raised his hand. He raised his hand.
Paying attention, or is he texting somebody?
He was actually paying attention.
Yay, congratulations to you. All right.
Go.
And hold on 2 seconds. Sorry, folks.
It's okay.
Okay, and our next prize winner is there's a wonderful holiday/winter single that was recorded by Precious, and so it's a digital download that you can listen to while you're drinking hot chocolate and not enjoying the snow, and that goes to Stephanie Valdez.
Stephanie, I think she was in the room. Stephanie, are you here?
She's in the room.
She's in the room. Stephanie, going once.
You want to raise your hand or unmute,
Raise
Stephanie?
your hand.
She could be tied up with the baby.
That's very true.
I'm here. I just couldn't.
Good.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. So on that note, remember we have the banquet tonight, including scholarship winners and awards, and our keynote speech from our fabulous national rep, and the auction with some fabulous prizes, more door prizes. So we will give you all a bit of a break right now, and we will see you back here right on 7 p.m. sharp. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.